Hello, and welcome to ATG the podcast. I'm Caroline Goldsmith, Associate Director for the Charleston Hub, and today we're talking with Dr. Mark Hahnel. Mark, you earned your PhD in stem cell biology while simultaneously founding Figshare. You've worked with DataCite, DOAJ, NIH, you've done some master classes with Springer Nature, and just this past year you became VP of Open Research with Digital Science, which, you being a researcher, that's a great fit. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you
And
for having me.
yeah, for sure. So just this past July, Digital Science undertook a global survey, and we featured it on Against the Grain. We put it in our daily newsletter email, and you guys were seeking answers to some pressing issues in the research world and for open science, such as how roles are impacted, what's influencing the change, how the research world is changing due to AI. You did some very insightful interviews with Delta Think, and these results have now been compiled into a report. So, what inspired Digital Science to undertake this report and to do the survey?
I'm very happy that you mentioned the interviews in there as well, because we were very fortunate to get some good people to join us on the journey of understanding what's going on. But I think the speed of transformation in research is something that is shocking us at the moment in terms of, I think those of us who've worked in the academic sector and particularly some of your audience who may work at academic institutions will say there's always change. They've got used to the evolution of the research setup, whether it's in the library and there's no longer the books and they're more kind of like WeWork setups. But I think there's a few things that have really triggered an acceleration in transformation. I think when we reference COVID, it's not the 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 COVID itself that changed things. It's the way that we work now in a post-COVID world. And I always think like the fact that my dad knows how to use QR codes in restaurants just shows how
Hmm.
far we've come.
For sure.
Um, and so I think the digital transformation within research and more people working in different ways um, has had an impact. And I think the other big cliche zeitgeisty thing is AI, and particularly in the open research world where I'm based, I think there's a lot of excitement around the potential for AI, and we're not sure how it affects every. I'm sure it'll touch every part of everything that we do in our careers. Um, but some areas it's more obvious, and some areas it's not so obvious. And I think we're still trying to understand that. But I really think it's a step change in the way that research is happening, and then the folks who are in the research world, not necessarily the researchers, but those supporting the researchers, those working in publishing. I think there really is a step change coming in the way that we do a lot of the things. And so we wanted to know what was happening and try and get our head around it and try and understand, try and elucidate which bits are important, which bits are not as important for folks and their evolving academic lives.
Hmm. In Digital Science, you guys made a really neat video compiling. It was given the 5 key takeaways, and we're going to link to that in the session description. But can you summarize those? Like, tell us some of the key findings.
Yeah, I mean, the big three topics for me were open research, research metrics, and AI. Not surprisingly, AI.
Right.
Um, but I was happy, to hear that open research was a big thing going forward. I think it was 82% of respondents uh, said that open research advancements would have the most impact on research in general going forward. Um, I see that as a good thing that open research is part of the conversation, but I think there's also this uh, everybody who was commenting on this was not always commenting on it in it's a great thing. I think
Right.
the end result is a great thing,
Mhm.
but you know, just talk about open access alone and the 18,000 different models of open access that you've got to get your head around. And if that's your job, the job's getting a lot more complicated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think the interesting thing, and again, the encouraging thing about research impact, um, is I think everyone agrees on this. We're moving towards a more holistic view of what research impact means and what metrics we use to measure, to tell the story. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
binary thing, right? It's not this university has the most citations, they're number one. It's a
Right.
much more holistic viewpoint, and I think funders are getting behind that. We've obviously seen different declarations. So it's not as necessarily a surprise that metrics are an important thing going forward, but it's the view of the way in which we contextualize and tell the story seems to be the big thing going
Yeah, the
forward.
bigger picture. Were there any
Yeah.
findings that you were surprised about that just really shocked you?
Yeah. So the as I mentioned, AI not necessarily shocking. Research metrics, I think, was surprising in the way that it was the storytelling. Open research, not necessarily surprised, but I was excited about. I think the real surprise for me was the findings around, um, collaboration is booming. We know that for every uh, country of every author from a different country that's added to a paper is correlated with more citations. So we know that
Mm-hmm.
collaboration is something that researchers and their institutions are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think there's concerns about the security aspect there and security and risk management in general needing a strategic and cultural overhaul was something that
Right.
I wasn't expecting. Right? It
Yeah.
seems to have happened very quickly that security and risk management in research and in academic institutions. I don't remember us talking about it 4 or 5 years ago. And so that's a shock to see. It's not a shock in the sense that I think it's a really important thing, especially given the macroeconomic climate. Um, but it was surprising that it is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. 58% of respondents said they expect to spend more time um, on research security going forward. So that still
Yeah.
sounds like.
Yeah, I saw that in there, and I was wondering if that's going to be a topic at the conference this year coming up. So,
Yeah,
that's what's going to be interesting. So, what part
yeah,
of the report were you very happy to see?
yeah. I was happy. I was happy to see the open research stuff. I mean, the
Yeah.
combination of open research and AI together, I think, is where we're headed, and I think it's always been a question. It's always been, is open access going to be a thing? Open data, the world I'm from, is that going to be a thing? And we've seen funder mandates, funder policies moving the conversation along at a fast rate. And so the fact that that's really hit home that, again, as I say, not necessarily a positive all around, it's more a case of the rubber is hitting the road and we're going to have to deal with this.
Yeah.
That's the the everybody seems positive about it because everybody likes the idea that they're working in a space where, the sustainable development goals are the urgent needs that need to be solved. And I'm a big believer in technology. And I think a lot of the people we spoke to are aware of the problems that, or the bureaucracy or the knowledge gaps in this new open research world.
Hmm.
But ultimately, they're happy to be working in an industry that they get to directly affect change and move the needle on some of these issues.
Yeah. So, what are the actions or the key takeaways that you think the library community should do based on this report and the findings?
Yeah, I think there's. I think read the report.
Hmm. Yeah, it's
There's
interesting.
it's for this community.
Hmm.
It's written about you, the listener. So I think you might be interested to see if it aligns with what you're thinking about. I think the interesting part for me is understanding where the skills gaps might be coming and how is that going to affect my my career in this
Mm-hmm.
industry, and am I clued up enough? Do I agree? Um, I think the AI's transformation potential is huge, but bureaucracy and skill gaps threaten progress. That's the line we use. That
Mm-hmm.
if I was in the space, I'd be thinking about, okay, what are those skill gaps, and is there any way I can plug them going forward or lean on my colleagues to help move the space
Mm-hmm.
at my own institution?
Mm-hmm. And will you guys be presenting on this at the conference this year? Are you guys doing some sessions? I know you're a big supporter of the conference. You guys are sponsors this year. You always heavily
Yeah,
participate, and we're always glad to have you. I was just curious if you're gonna do
we'll
anything
be
about
there.
this.
The digital science CEO Daniel Hook will be
Mm-hmm.
talking it this year as well. So he's always got some very considered thoughts around the space, and I think, he's aware of the transformation, but he gets very excited about the transformation that's happening. And we're all,
Yeah.
as I say, we work for a technology company. We're technologists at heart, and I think Charleston's always been a fantastic conference for
Mm-hmm.
understanding, well, for conversations. I think people are aware of the trends, and this report is looking at the trends. And
Mm-hmm.
Charleston's always, you mentioned there might be more on research security this year.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah, we like
I
trend
think,
spotting. I'm sorry.
yeah,
Trend spotting
yeah,
initiatives and what's coming down the pipeline, what's the future of the library landscape. We like predicting all those things to try to prepare for them and have sessions on that. So we were talking about where our listeners can access this full report. We're going to link to that video in the session description, but where can they actually go to read the full report?
yeah. We'll be, of course, uh, at Digital Science on Twitter. We'll be tweeting out, or X as it's called now, and LinkedIn, and all of the
Yeah.
usual social media
Yeah.
places. But we'll also be it's got its own URL at digital-science.com/academic research transformation. And that'll have all of the associated materials. Of course, we make the data openly available. We eat our own dog food as somebody who's
I like that
pushed open
phrase.
data. Yeah. So if you wanted to go and dig into the data and find out some more, reanalyze it in different ways, it's there for you to do so as well. So we'll be making all of that available under that URL.
Awesome. And so you're heading off to Australia tomorrow, is what I've been told, doing some traveling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've got a lot of conversations to have, and so we've got a bit of travel to be done, and it's good to. We always find it's good to get the global footprint. Again, why we did the report is to understand what's happening globally with because different countries have different rules. I always think about it as,
Hmm.
their own terms and conditions. And while there's global trends, it's always, again, going to Charleston and getting your feet on the ground with North American colleagues is where we find a lot of the real nuance in what they need and what's shaping the space. What's coming down the road, like you say.
Yeah. And did you see any areas predominantly showing up in your survey the results were from, or was it pretty, I know it was global in nature, but did you see any areas popping up more than others for respondents?
Yeah, well, what's nice is that you do see differences when you filter it on the regional differences, but also the types of interviewees and the different jobs that they have. So that's why I was saying before, with the listeners who might be interested, you can see what the folks with a similar job to you are saying around the world, and
Hmm.
there are some differences, but there's a lot of similarities.
Hmm.
But also what the job you might want to move into, what they're
Gotcha.
thinking about, and so you can prep yourself and think, well, maybe if I want to advance my career that way, I need to be more concerned about metrics because that part of the world or that
Hmm.
part of the career
Yeah.
ladder seems to be focused on metrics in the next five
Yeah.
years. We've got this kind of 5 years ago and 5 years forward. What do you think will be? What's
Hmm.
changed and what do you think will change? And I think that's useful.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for talking with us about the Research Transformation Report, Mark. We really appreciate you taking your time today. I know you're busy, and we just wish you safe travels, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you in
Thanks so
Charleston.
much, Henry. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.